Namaste. There are many ideas, concepts, and frameworks which we use on a daily basis to lead our lives effectively. While they look very simple in the beginning, they lead you in many dilemmas when it comes to perspectives of application. There are many wise people, experts, and practitioners who can bring simple but profound perspectives to these ideas, concepts, and frameworks, which will make it easy for us to use them profitably and use them joyfully. Mentor podcasts are about demystifying these ideas, concepts, and frameworks for you. Make them easy to use, and on your behalf, we will talk to these wise people and demystify these ideas for you. Welcome to the Mentor Podcast. Raghu Ananthanarayanan is a direct disciple of Yogacharya Krishnamacharya. He was mentored by Jiddu Krishnamurti and Professor Pulin Garg. He is a world-renowned yoga teacher, an explorer, and adventurer into many dimensions of Indic wisdom. An alumni of IIT Madras, Raghu is currently the chief mentor of Ritambara Ashram. He is also the co-founder of Sumedhas, a great body involved in process work. Raghu helps individuals live a life replete with dharma and rasa. Come on, let us meet Raghu and do a conversation with him to demystify learning through mythology, a path for leaders. Namaste, Raghu.
Namaste.
As usual, it's awesome to have you. And, this is the 20th year of our service to learning. So we thought we will celebrate it by giving as much as we can, okay? And Vidya is the best thing to do, Dhan. So that's the idea. And when I thought about this idea, learning through mythology. So mythology has been a tool of the culture, as I've seen. So how can we help leaders learn through mythology because it's immersive? In fact, I was inspired by both your, I would say, hallmark pieces of work. One is your Mahabharata immersion that you do, and the book, the Leadership Dharma, Arjuna, the Timeless Metaphor. Okay, I think they were very inspiring, Raghu. And
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I thought, we should give the benefit of these ideas, okay, to more people. And that's the reason why we are doing this podcast, Raghu. And thank you for giving us the time and, giving all your gyan so freely to people. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity, Mani. I've actually written another book also afterwards called The 5 Seats of Power.
Oh, okay.
Where I've exemplified on the Pandavas.
Okay, lovely, lovely, very nice.
Yeah.
So go on, please.
Yeah. Now, let me start with responding to your question. I think it's important to, first of all, look at the word mythology.
Yeah.
Because of late, people have looked at mythology as untruth and all kinds of strange ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Now, the Sanskrit terms, which I think translate to mythology, would be Itihasa Purana. And these are very, very interesting words. Yeah. See, like the word Itihasa is a good translation would be, is this the way people lived? Is this the way it was?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a kind of a look back with admiration and with an idea of learning.
Correct. Here it happened.
This is how it happened. Those are the parallels. to the
Correct.
word itihasa.
Correct.
And the word Purana can be split into two words.
Yeah.
Pura api navam.
Yeah.
It is ancient and yet it is nascent.
Relevant.
Yeah. So how does an ancient tale become nascent?
That's true.
Yeah, it becomes nascent because I don't read the story as though it's a story of somebody else and something that happened very, very long time ago. I read the stories as though they're all parts of me, inside me, coming alive today through the story. So it comes very close to the Jungian idea of archetypal energies or archetypal roles. Yeah, the word archetype.
Yeah.
Like the arche, which is a very old thing. Now, the archetype is coming alive in me. So the moment I look at it like that, it's very obvious how you learn from Itihasa Purana.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's only if you place it in some other context, in some other place, that it becomes a difficult thing. Because then you'll ask the question, something happened 3,000, 5,000, 8,000 years ago, whatever the historians are fighting about the dates now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what I do is I convert every one of these situations in which an event happens into something which is symbolic of human realities.
Absolutely. In fact, I was about to say that the word theater that comes from the Greek root thea is actually a beautiful example of how you can learn from the archetypes. Okay, so when you see, when you see something that has happened or something that has lived, something that has thrived and has gone through, consequences, it's a great way to learn, isn't it?
Absolutely. See, in fact, Mani, I started working with these things through a program which I initially called the Learning Theatre. Yeah, we would make people understand what it means to awaken things inside, like the series of little drawings you have in this background is of music and dance. The Indian idea of dance and the way people express themselves is very deeply intertwined with understanding internally what is happening to you.
Absolutely. In fact, I wanted to quiz you on something. You very beautifully spoke on the mythology part. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the common misconceptions, or I would say lack of understanding, that I have experienced in my 28, 30 years of work with people is what is learning? Because I find people very obsessed with the cognitive side of learning. Knowledge is too much at a premium. Would you want to throw some light on? I think you worked on people for a very, very long time, Raghu. So, what in your opinion is learning?
See, if you again I'd like to go back to Sanskrit words, Mani.
Beautiful.
Because they put across these ideas very, very clearly.
Yeah.
See, in Sanskrit, there are different words.
Yeah.
Like, which apply to learning, knowledge, and all that. So one word is Pandityam.
Pandityam, yeah.
Now, in the yogic tradition, the word Pandityam means intellectual learning about something.
Okay.
Now, that is not given that much of importance.
Okay.
It's an important thing, but it is not considered very great.
Correct.
Then you have the word jnanam. Now, jnanam is a word that implies that you have thought deeply about whatever you've heard, whatever you have read, all the intellectual stuff, and other life experiences. You put them together, and it is starting to transform me. See, in Malayalam, when they use the word jnana, it's close to this jnanam.
Wow.
how do I start transforming?
Mm.
Yeah. And then you have other words like Vijnana.
Correct.
Vijnanam is to go even more subtle
Correct.
and understand the process of engagement, the process of learning, the process of my own growth
Correct.
much more subtly.
Oh, beautiful. So the Pandita and the Jnani are two very different people,
Very
really.
different people. A Pandita and a Jnani are very different people. And Prajnanam is going even more subtle
Okay.
and learning, from books and learning through words and all that disappear when you get into Prajnanam.
Correct.
Because there the learning happens at a very subtle level from, very deep parts of oneself through intuition and things like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
See, one of the things that we have to understand with leadership also
Yeah.
is that, see, people look at leadership as some kind of decision making,
Correct.
and these kinds of ideas are usually used for leadership.
Correct.
Yeah, if you look at the Indic
Sorry, the classic planning, organizing, leading, control.
exactly, all of that. All of this sounds like your prefrontal brain working, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, your very logical brain working.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at it through the mythology, through the Itihasa Purana, it is the whole being and how this being is responding to situations. Right? So if this being is not shifted, if it's not changed, if it's not transformed through a process, learning doesn't happen. If I'm the same person today as I was yesterday, as I was day before, and so on, I'm not allowing my experiences of the world to transform me.
Correct.
Learning is not happening at all. I'm
Correct.
just relying on an old, bottle box, closed box of knowledge.
Correct.
That is Panditya.
Correct. So, in a sense, Raghu, a lot of people have asked me this. I am something, so I have an identity, and my identity is obviously influencing my environment and vice versa. Both are happening. And this awareness, Raghu, it certainly cannot be cognitive, isn't it? It has to cross the cognitive realm,
Absolutely.
and one kind of deepens it into intuition, isn't it?
Let's go a little slowly here, Mani.
Okay.
Probably amygdala.
Yeah.
Now, what yogic science says,
Yeah.
which is being accepted more and more even today by the West,
Okay.
is that there is a very subtle response to the world around me, which is at the level of what they call rasa.
Okay.
Okay, now rasa is not emotion.
Okay.
So it's often translated as emotion, which is okay for general things. But if you're going deep into the subject, it's not just emotion.
Okay.
It's what the new word again that's coming up in the West is the word qualia.
Oh, okay.
Like emotional qualia. It's a very subtle thing. And this moves the whole body. So nowadays they're talking about peptides which which start interacting and start responding to the world around much, much earlier than your brain cognizes that there is something happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So this is a chemical process. This actually impacts the heart first. And there is more signals that come from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart. So in this process, your the reptilian brain
Correct.
starts coming in the way.
Correct.
Now, the entire practice of yoga
Mm.
is how do you respond without this reptilian brain coming in the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact,
So both the Itihasa Puranas, now both Ramayana and Mahabharata,
mm,
if you look at the whole story, it's of the transformation of a person
mm,
into, from whatever they start with. So Rama is a very young person,
yes.
so on and so forth. He goes through test after test after test,
Mm,
learns and transforms himself through every one of these
mm,
until he can respond to a danger which is like Ravana
mm.
from a place which we can call divine.
True. Very
Which
true.
means his reptilian brain is not coming in the way.
Mm,
His old thoughts don't come in the way.
mm.
There is a very intuitive, even superior intelligence that flows through the person
Yeah.
in response to the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the story of transformation that our mythologies talk about. The same with the Mahabharata. No?
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Mahabharata is even more specific about this.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring two things. Okay. One is the idea of intelligence. Okay.
Hmm.
And intelligence is responding to stimuli in spite of the emotions. Okay. So, not because of
No, no,
them.
no. Again, Mani. Let's look at this slowly. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, if we have to understand what is happening to a human being, nah,
Yeah.
we,
True.
we have to rely much more on the yogic ways of looking at things than the Western. The
Correct.
reason is
Correct.
the Western modes of studying a human being are outside him.
Correct.
So you are actually, when you're talking about behaviorist, no, you know what's happened in the West. See, though the whole field of psychology started with introspection, at one point of time, after the Vienna Convention and things like that,
Mm.
there was a clear split
Yeah.
in the whole Western knowledge
Exactly.
gathering process. And they said if something is not measurable, it cannot be admitted as science.
Totally. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
So a whole set of people like William Wundt and so on, who had started this psychology area with introspection,
Correct.
were pushed aside into philosophy.
Mm.
And slowly the whole question became, how can you talk about the self? You can't measure the self and so on. So people like William James made some very brave attempts to bring self back, but he also failed.
Mm.
Finally, Skinnerian behaviorism
Correct.
kind of thing took over.
Correct. Yeah. Very utilitarian in concept. Yeah.
And then it becomes extremely utilitarian.
Correct.
And even Freud was converted into something very utilitarian, which is why he became famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, his understanding of the human mind was converted into advertising
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
So he became famous. The stimulus response idea of perception
Mm.
is an idea that is not a complete idea of learning or response.
Exactly.
See, the yogic idea is that from within me, there is an energetic orientation towards the world.
Mm.
This energetic orientation, which is called a pranic movement, you can imagine it as a cascading kind of energy that goes through various levels of me. And through my senses, it goes outward, engages with something, and takes back the impression inside.
Correct.
This is very simple to test. No? Yeah. Now, there are so many things around me now.
Yeah.
I'm paying attention to you.
Yeah.
None of the other so-called stimuli are having any response in me.
Absolutely.
So if I'm only a response mechanism,
Yeah.
how do I choose to pay attention to you?
Absolutely. That's
And
brilliant.
this is at a very simple level,
Correct.
illustrating this idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the entire Indian way, the yogic way of looking at perception is that it's something that I choose to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when I'm inside me, if I'm not holding on to old hurts,
Mm.
if I'm not holding on to old pain,
Mm.
if I'm not holding on to certain kinds of desires,
Mm.
then what I do is I allow this perceptual process to happen from a very deep intuitive space.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Otherwise, I'm actually orienting myself to the outside, constantly restless, looking out for danger, looking out for opportunities to grab something. If I'm outward oriented like this, I cannot be intelligent.
Yeah.
It's only when this restlessness to acquire something or to constantly protect myself be armored. So, in a sense, I go into the world with an armor and a sword.
Correct.
Armor to protect myself and a sword to go and achieve something, to
Correct.
accomplish, to acquire something. This orientation comes from a disturbed mind.
Absolutely.
When the mind quietens down, a whole different approach to the world takes over, which is compassionate, which is appropriate, and so on. Only then learning takes place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's a continuous process of just some adjustments, conditioning, sharpening my sword a little bit, polishing my shield a little bit. That would not be considered acquiring jnana.
Absolutely. You get so busy judging that you stop perceiving at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right. Very nice. No, so that in fact, what enamored me to the likening to mythology and how the mythological constructs, okay, can make you learn effortlessly. It is the effortlessness and the intuitive way of learning, okay, that kind of attracted me to this whole area. In fact, I wanted to ask you, how does mythology influence human behavior, choices, beliefs, values, etc.? And particularly, how does it influence leaders? Because I see leaders as people who are choosing to do what most people don't do. I think they take responsibility. They try to kind of offer something larger. Okay, so how does it influence them, or is my thought process correct at all?
Yeah, very interesting question, except that you're asking 2, 3 questions simultaneously. So let me try and break it down.
Sure.
See, first of all, we need to understand the word leadership. See, the way I'm looking at it is, a very simple thing of saying that every time I'm presented with a situation, yeah, if I'm looking at it with any level of interest and curiosity,
okay,
and if I'm looking at it intelligently, I can always look at how this thing can be improved.
Okay.
Right. Now, leaders are people who are constantly able to look at a situation with this extra in them. They don't take the situation as is.
Okay.
They are always able to immediately say, this is where something can be improved. This is where it's not optimal, and so on. I want to contrast it with a person who's a follower. A follower, what does the follower do? When they go into a situation, even if they have an idea of how it can be made better,
Mm.
they never take the courage
Mm.
to express it or to in any way influence the situation. They wait for somebody else to tell them this is how something different can be done.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, this is very critical to look at
Mm.
because in followership also, there are levels of followership.
Mm.
Yeah. So a more, let's say, responsive follower will already have thought about a few things, but he's not willing to take responsibility. So that word that you used is very important.
Correct.
He's not willing to take responsibility for the outcomes, positive or negative.
Correct.
But if you come along
Mm.
and give that assurance that, look, I will pay the price,
Yeah.
then some of these people will be willing to bring forth their ideas.
Correct.
So, what does a really intelligent leader do? He fundamentally makes sure that people are not anxious about the outcome. He takes responsibility,
Mm.
and if he's a wise leader, asks people for their idea of how it can be made different.
Yeah.
Yeah, authoritarian leaders don't do this.
Correct.
So there's a difference between an authoritarian leader who says, I'll take a responsibility, I'll also take winner takes all kind of an attitude,
Yeah.
which to me is not leadership, it is acquisitiveness.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, leadership to me is when you're willing to say this can be made better.
Mm.
You're wise enough to ask people their opinions and points of view
Mm.
and consider what impact this is going to have on the world, not just on the immediate acquisitive impulse, but on a longer term.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm pushing the boundary in 2-3 directions.
Mm.
Not just, how can this situation be made better, but what is the implication in a larger time frame,
Wonderful.
right? Then there'll be followers who won't think at all,
Mm.
who'll be waiting for instructions,
Correct.
right? So leadership, you have to contrast with these to get an understanding of what is this person doing, which is different from what the other people around are doing.
Wonderful. In fact, the big takeaway here, Raghu, is a good leader is able to put the anxieties of people around to rest, and their
Yes.
amygdalas are not aroused. Their amygdalas are so feeling so safe.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the joyfulness comes out. It oozes out.
Of course. Only then it will come out, no?
Yeah, correct. Now that brings us to the crux of this whole conversation, Raghu.
Yeah.
This is not something that someone can logically put inside you.
No.
Someone can model, a behavior for you or a framework for you, and push it inside you.
No, you can't.
This intuitive learning apparently comes brilliantly from immersing into mythology and studying and learning from mythology. Throw some light on that, Raghu. How does one immerse into it?
See, two things, Mani. You asked some very interesting questions. You talked about theater in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, if you go back into how human beings have grown, the primary way of teaching young people the ways of the tribe was through theater.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So all the, you can see it now in all these, documentaries that they will show of African tribes and so on.
Correct.
It's very clear that in certain kinds of dances, not the celebratory dances, but there are other dances where the person is taught how to go attacking a lion with a spear. There'll be this whole thing being played out, and the whole body is engaged in the process of learning. It's an embodied process.
Yeah.
So that is why I use theater as a way of helping people understand leadership. You cannot teach leadership.
Correct.
You can enable this whole being to become more responsive to situations the way I was telling you.
Correct.
Right? If there is fear in me, I cannot intellectually remove my fear because the reptilian brain processes precede
Correct.
cortex, no?
Correct.
They dictate what the cortex is going to think.
Correct.
So it's an embodied learning which includes many of the fundamentals of what we call yoga.
Yeah.
First of all, how do I remain calm in a situation that seems to be either threatening or full of opportunity?
Yeah.
I mean, even in cricket,
detached, that kind of state.
Even in cricket, no, they keep talking about the stance that the person is taking, whether it's balanced and quiet and attentive or not.
Absolutely.
Now, if the person steps out too early, is too anxious and steps out too early, chances are the bowler will figure him out and get him out like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's too anxious.
Yeah.
Right? If he's fearful, they figure it out also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a central part of the learning. And through theater, we first of all help a person to understand what is this Shantam.
Beautiful.
And from this Shantam stance, can I start looking at the world, looking at other people and responding to them?
Yeah.
Immediately you'll find that your responses are much more intelligent, more compassionate, and also much more with conviction. There's a conviction that comes in when there is a sense of anchorage in the self, sense of calmness in the self, and your response is coming from much deeper, subtler part of you. You know this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this learning is very, very critical for a leader because you cannot tell people around you, don't be anxious.
Totally.
It will only make them more anxious.
In fact, Raghu, interesting perspective. When I worked with materials, I realized that you cannot force them with anything.
Absolutely.
To change any property of a material, I have to understand it deeply enough so that I can align forces. Okay, I cannot force alignment at all, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember working with a planter once. I was doing some work with plantations and all that. This person came and he was talking to this group of young people, no, who were very good already, tea planters. He said, to make a plant grow, you have to know how a plant grows.
Absolutely.
I thought it was a very lovely, simple statement. And the problem is most people don't know how people grow.
Absolutely.
Right? And psychology does not tell you how people grow. It tells you how you might be able to manipulate people from the outside.
Correct.
They give you some statistical thing about, which is usually a bunch of people in America, 20, 30 people who behave in a certain way and so on.
Correct. Yeah,
let me give you an example. I think it's very important for people to understand this. See, there is a very famous experiment by a person called Muzaffar Sharif. Now, that is quoted in many places. What it did was, this person did a very interesting experiment. He took up two groups of scouts, slightly isolated place. One of them was in one end of the estate, another one in the other part of the estate. They didn't know that, both of them were there.
Okay.
Right. So over about a week or so, these people formed great in-group bonds. And then they were brought together and some games were played. If I remember right, something like basketball or some other things happened, and so-called collaborative games were supposed to be played. And then they found that these people had strong in-group solidarity and out-group antagonism. So this is taken as a proof that human beings are generally competitive. Now, the problem with this experiment is, this is quoted again and again and again. There are several other experiments that have been made where people in Africa, for instance, they're asked to compete.
Okay.
Native American children are asked to compete. They don't compete, they wait for each other, they make sure that everybody gets a prize, and so on. Okay. Now, the other thing that you also have to keep in mind is that this context is what determines behavior. It's not just individual behavior, it's the whole context. How does a tree grow? It's not just because of the seed. It's also because of the ground it grows on and how much of water you give. Do you give it the right light, sunlight, and so on? Yeah. So let's look at this example a little more deeply, because a lot of people are being influenced today by this kind of so-called scientific experiments.
Correct.
Yeah. Where are you taking these two bunches of people from? From an American context, which is already hyper competitive, which says winner take all. So the meaning-making psyche has already been primed with ideas of competition.
Correct.
And then you put them through a small experiment, and then you prove that these are competitive. To me, what does it prove? It proves that if you take people from a context which is priming them to say me versus the world is antagonistic.
Correct.
And these kind of fundamental meanings about the self and the world, and put them in any place, they will be competitive and they will go around acquiring things and using power to self-aggrandize.
Correct. So,
right? Now, if you take people for whom the meaning of the world and the meaning of the self is very different, they will behave differently in the same space, same context.
So just to kind of, I think this is beautiful, Raghu. As it is evolving, I just wanted to make a point. So as a leader, this understanding of belief systems and a larger understanding of context becomes totally critical.
That's exactly what I'm coming to. That's why the Indian mythology is so important. Okay. Let me add another fact to it. It's not very well known that Maslow studied Native American tribes.
Okay.
He lived with Native American tribes for extended periods of time. He found that in those tribes, what was rewarded with altruism and not self-centered power.
Wonderful.
Exactly. And then he tries to talk about this, the so-called scientific establishment he's part of doesn't accept it, so he quietly keeps it off and talks about a certain, what is now called hierarchy.
Okay.
Though I don't think he called it hierarchy to be, respectful of him. It has become hierarchy of need. This is a partial understanding even of Maslow.
Correct.
So let's parse this even further. You have a group of people for whom the world belongs to me is their fundamental idea of being. You have another group of people who are saying, I belong to the world, I belong to the earth. These are completely different human beings. These are completely different psyches.
Correct.
And this is the critical thing we need to look at today for leadership. If we have to go forward, and if we have to have a hospitable, livable earth, ideas that come out of a mind that says the earth belongs to me have to be called out, because they are extremely dangerous points of view.
Correct.
We are destroying the earth with this mind. The only way forward, which will be equitable, sustainable, and all these words that are becoming very popular now, is through really looking at what is it that I have done to create the idea that the world belongs to me when it's obviously not true. So Ubuntu, ideas that you're referring to, no? So, and the ideas of, it's a fact, Mani, if you're sitting there and I'm sitting here, so many things have to have worked, and so many people for thousands of years have to have done things.
Correct.
The computer to be, for me to be sitting here in a chair or wherever, right? I'm completely interdependent with everything in the world. And this deep respect for the earth, when it is absent, and leadership is situated in a place where this deep respect for the world and respect for others is not, that idea of leadership is acquisitiveness. It is not leadership.
Absolutely.
Where the Pandavas are in the Vanavasa, na?
Yeah.
We'll come back. The Vanavasa itself is a very interesting concept. They're in Vanavasa, and they're Kshatriyas, they're hunting and things like that. And then Yudhishthira has a dream.
Yeah.
Where a deer comes and tells him, you're being here for a few years, you're depleting us. Yeah. And it cries. Yeah, it's very sad. So Yudhishthira gets up and says, I'm making a mistake. I can't stay in the same forest and keep on hunting in this forest. It is not dharmic. Because if I'm dharmic, I have to make sure that everything grows, not just me.
Yeah.
I can't exploit it. So he keeps moving. So after that, they don't stay in one place. They move so that there can be regeneration. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very, very beautiful little story to learn from, no? About leadership.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you really, it's become so serious now that if you don't really understand from these situations, there is going to be no world for you to exploit tomorrow, yeah?
Totally.
As simple as that, right?
So nice, Raghu. A couple of things are just, jumping out of my mind. One is this Masanobu Fukuoka, the one-star revolution, agriculture. Oh, he makes this awesome statement. He says, the day you thought you want food on your table, there began the destruction. Is where, he starts. Agriculture is the first violence that we committed on nature, one. And the second thing that's jumping is so beautiful, Raghu. Nature is such a brilliant engineer that it allows replenishment, and it has programmed it into the nature of everything that works with it, right? Yeah, renewal and replenishment.
Absolutely.
And if a leader doesn't understand that context, okay, so then I don't know, God help the leader. Is that so?
All of us, no, not just help the leader. The leader can go wherever he wants. God help all of us in the world.
Yeah. Please go on, Raghu. Sorry.
No, because one of the things that's absent today, even in ideas of leadership, is enough emphasis on the crisis we are facing today and what does leadership mean in the context of today's crisis. Yeah, see, another aspect of learning, is to really look at and understand why am I where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the World Economic Forum has suddenly started talking about a polycrisis. Now, the polycrisis is not a new thing. The idea of a polycrisis, the way they draw that picture in the report that they've brought and things like that, is not a new thing. This was already written up by a group of people called the Club of Rome in the 70s, where they did deep analysis, systems analysis of interdependencies and things like that, and talked about the impending crisis. Yeah, many of the scientists who did that had to face difficulties in their career. That's besides the point.
Okay.
Right? Now, if you look at that 80-page report, there's not one mention of the mindset that has brought us to this polycrisis.
Okay.
That is not happening. Yeah, not even one line that says it's a certain mindset and a way of looking at the environment that has brought us to this crisis. It puts out the crisis nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because see, the fact is that science has already given us a lot of tools, even way back in the 80s and all that. There are lots of things that have been written about how there's enough technology, enough understanding of the environment, and so on, to change the course of the way we use technology.
Yeah.
And how, if you do that, you will create not only a sustainable world, but like what you said, an economically more equitable world, a happier world, and all of this. It's not a new thing.
Absolutely.
But there is a deliberate choice of not heeding these voices, not looking at this knowledge base, and so on. See?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Right. Now, this is where I would like to come back to this Vanavasa. Yeah. See, many people miss out on a few fundamental structures of the mythology. The story itself is one part of it. The underlying structure which throws up the story is very, very important. Yeah. So I'll tell you two things about the Mahabharata which are very critical.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, why does the Vanavasa take place? Because Yudhishthira is already a king of Hastinapura, whatever, and Indraprastha has been created, right? And he is doing very well, and there is envy.
Yeah.
Gets pulled into something which he ought not to get pulled in because there is some unresolved things inside him which makes him choose to gamble. So he goes, he gambles, and we all know the story of what happened in the gambling.
Correct.
Now, after he does something which is adharmic, which destroys his family, he destroys himself, he realizes it and goes on a retreat. He goes into Vanavasa. He goes back into those parts of himself that are not cultured. That is the Vanavasa. He goes and looks inside and says, how do I develop a more cultured being within me?
Yeah.
If you see the Mahabharata, every point of time where something adharmic is done, the Kauravas celebrate or they go into a sulk. If they lose in that thing, they go into a sulk. If they win, they just kind of celebrate. But the Pandavas go back into a Vanavasa.
Yeah.
Right? So when they build a house of lac, symbolically, I think I've built a beautiful house. It's actually not very stable. It's not very viable. It gets burnt down. What do? I go back and say, where did I go wrong? What mistakes have I made? What can I learn about the way I have lived that allowed this event to happen, that brought me to this point?
So Vanavasa is the metaphoric introspection and correction and learning.
Into those parts of me which are uncultured, those parts of me which are unexplored.
Yeah.
This is very critical for leadership.
And another interesting contrast you're bringing out, Raghu, as I see, is that for the Western mind, you look for all the reasons outside of you first, right?
Exactly.
You don't look at what you do.
How I created the context that I got stuck in.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then you're looking at conquest. See, because you're constantly looking at conquest.
Yeah.
So they go inward and they do this deep search. And very interestingly, the last part of the search is called Ajnata Vasam.
Correct.
To go into the deepest, darkest parts of yourself, which is completely opposite to everything I'm used to.
Correct.
Yeah, in Jungian language today, it's called shadow. Yeah, Ajnatam can easily be translated as shadow, right?
Correct.
The completely unknown, untouched parts of me.
Yeah.
Become a servant. I am completely separated from people I've lived with all my life. I keep all my great weapons away. I'm completely bereft of what I thought were my great positives and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, this process of deep introspection is extremely critical. You'll see that in the Ramayana, you'll see that in the
Correct.
Mahabharata. This
Yeah.
is very, very critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other critical structure, which
Yeah.
I think in our context of learning through mythology and leadership and all that is very important, is there's another underlying structure of the Mahabharata,
Yeah.
which comes in the Ramayana also, but not that directly. Every critical situation, there will be three voices. One voice will say, this is the dharmic thing to do.
Okay.
So you have Vidura all the time telling Dhritarashtra what's the dharmic thing to do.
Okay.
There'll be a voice that is looking at self-centered adharmic choices, which, let's say in this case, is Duryodhana.
Correct.
And then there is a person who has to make a choice, which in some incidents in the Mahabharata, clearly, explicitly, this person will say, I know this is dharmic, I know this is adharmic. Even Dhritarashtra says that sometimes, but I'm just a human being, what do I do? And then the fourth alternative comes up, which is the heroic alternative. When the heroic alternative is missing, the individual falls back into the limited alternative. And that is why adharma happens.
Okay.
Yeah, this is extremely important both in learning and for leadership. Now, if a leader has honesty, he ought to have a dialogue of these three before he makes critical decisions or she makes critical decisions.
Very
I don't know. And also really search within to say, these are my limitations, these are my weaknesses, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, these are my propensities. Now, for me to really deal with this, what kind of a combination of capacities do I need, which will give a dharmic, heroic response?
Absolutely.
And then go back into the vanavasa. Every time I have made the response, I have to go back and deeply introspect and learn from it.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. This is a very, very critical cycle.
Oh, this is amazing. In fact, look at how intuitive this whole path is. The fear of darkness is creating anxieties in you and is influencing the way you behave. And therefore, you go into darkness, you go into Agyatavas so that, you become a lot more comfortable and get that shanti, that comfort. Yeah, so beautiful.
Isn't
Very
that what leadership is about? Yeah. Leadership is about going to places that are uncharted.
Exactly. So, in the interest of time, I wanted to ask you, how can a leader, in a practical sense, okay, what would you suggest, okay, a leader does to learn from mythology? What are some ways? What are some things that, he or she can do?
See, it's very simple, yeah. One is to read mythology like I'm saying. Yeah, don't read it as a story out there, but see what gets evoked in me.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, Ramayana for me is a whole story of an inner transformation of a young boy into a really mature human being. And if you look at his journey, it starts with dealing with Rakshasis.
Yeah.
So if you go into a Jungian kind of a frame in this, which is also there in India, the masculine in me has to meet the feminine forms, which I think are dangerous, which I can't deal with. So even before he meets Sita, he meets a Rakshasi.
Correct.
And so on. So at each stage, there is a wise teacher.
Yeah.
So he meets an adversary, he meets a problem, which is part of me, which is, I haven't understood. The Rakshasic part of me is there in me. I can't run away from it. So each encounter with the world will help me understand what is the human part of me, what's a dynamic possibility, what's an asuric possibility in me.
Beautiful. Yeah. So these are
When
not
I
stories,
read,
Raghu, sorry. So these are not stories really. These are
they're
perspective
not stories.
character.
They're all mirrors to my. That's why they're also called darshanas. Na? They're
Yeah,
mirrors to my inner journey.
yeah,
In the Mahabharata, you're given 5 possible ways in which I can act.
yeah,
5 possible seats of power is what I call them.
yeah.
Right? One is Yudhishthira. But
Mm,
what is his heroism? His heroism is being able to go into chaos and create order.
mm,
Yeah. Then you have Bhima.
mm,
Unfortunately, Bhima is generally seen as the model of leadership. It's just one model, which is a model of conquest.
mm.
So I go into places that are dangerous and use my power and
Win.
conquer.
Mm,
That's another form of heroism.
mm,
The most neglected form, which is very prevalent in most Indian managers, which they don't respect, is the Nakula form.
mm.
I'm compassionate and I create infrastructure where there is no infrastructure for other people to perform.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, this is something that's kind of gaining ground now, which is the heroism of intellect,
Mm,
which is the Sahadeva form,
mm,
where I know and understand things much deeper than other people, so I can be innovative.
mm.
But the most critical of these 4 is the Arjuna form, which can ask very, very difficult questions. Am I fighting the right war? Am I doing something dharmic or not? And when you ask these questions, no,
Mm.
exactly like what happens to Arjuna, you'll have a psychosomatic breakdown.
Wonderful. That's why you call him the timeless metaphor.
That's why I call it the timeless metaphor. You're right. Yeah, because when I ask fundamental questions of,
Mm.
am I doing the right thing or not? I'm questioning my entire understanding of myself and understanding of the world. That's
Yeah.
when you come up with, if you allow this to happen and you listen deeply inside, you come up with phenomenal breakthroughs.
This is what you're saying is cathartic, Raghu, in a sense. I
Of
just want
course.
to express this because today, the biggest catharsis that I find leaders at every level going through is what is important? Doing the right thing or doing things right?
Of course.
The doing things right is so enticing that you are lost and you want to kind of be the herd, run with the herd, and you want to be part. You lose the courage to do the right thing. So that's the Arjuna metaphor, right?
Exactly. Then are you really a leader? If you're just giving in to these kind of impulses, are you really a leader?
Wonderful, wonderful. So, what are some classic views that you hold in terms of, see, is mythology going to be some kind of a pivot to the way we will learn in India and probably globally? What is
I'm hoping that the way I'm suggesting that you look at Ramayana and Mahabharata
Hmm,
are more widely understood.
correct?
Yeah, Joseph Campbell has also hinted at this in his
Hmm,
book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. He kind of suggests something like this.
hmm,
Yeah, though he doesn't use theater and make an embodied thing, he's writing a book about it.
hmm.
Yeah, his approach is very interesting. I've taken a lot from his approach, apart from, of course, talking to people who are generally called village performers. No,
Hmm.
you should see the wisdom of the so-called village, what in Tamil they call Kuthu.
Yeah,
The Mahabharata Kuthu has
art,
been that's been going on in Tamil Nadu and other places for 1,000 years.
correct.
And the wisdom they have and the way they look at each of these figures, I've learned so much from them.
Yeah,
The nuances of each of the characters and what they undergo inside and all that, they really understand it.
correct.
Yeah, so
Context.
this embodied this embodied theatrical way of encountering the self through situations, I think is very critical for leadership.
Totally, totally. So the leader is really not about the right or the wrong. The leader is about the context, is what you're
It's the
saying.
being. No, a leader is the being in a context.
Yeah,
The
beautiful.
way the being responds to a context. It is not a skill.
Wonderful, wonderful. Brilliant, Raghu. I think in the interest of time, I wanted this context to come up beautifully. In fact, there are two or three things that make me, I don't know, for lack of expression, jump with curiosity. Okay, one is the exploration into darkness on your own, so that you get that yogic calm that you spoke about.
Ah,
That's
no,
amazing. That's
that
totally
can't be.
amazing.
No, you have to learn. Much of yoga is
Yeah,
not asana and pranayama.
yeah,
Asana and pranayama is less than 5% of the Yoga Sutras.
correct.
The bulk of the Yoga Sutras is this inner process of learning that helps you go into these unexplored areas.
Beautiful. Yeah,
That is called Antaranga Yoga.
absolutely.
You have to learn those methods. It's absolutely important. Even Chanakya recommends it. Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, see, I've been working with this for many years, Mani.
yeah.
Like in TCS, no, we've done this for more than 10 years. I started working with this sometime in 2013, 14 or something like that. No, around that time. And we've done more than 120 full 5-day programs
Wonderful.
on using Mahabharata and discovering the self through Mahabharata and these 5 types of power.
Tell us some of the manifested impacts that organizations have seen because of this kind of work.
Yeah, see, the first thing that happens is people get out of this idea that I have to imitate somebody else to understand leadership. When you go through these theatrical things, you understand how I express myself and you understand what is my swabhava, what are my gifts. Yeah, see, I have a huge problem with saying, Steve Jobs did this, Steve Jobs didn't do it. I'm not Steve Jobs here. Right? Yeah. This is why I'm saying the being is so important. No? The being of Steve Jobs has been shaped in a certain way through certain sets of experiences, which included coming and sitting with Neem Karoli Baba, all kinds of things he's done. My being is not shaped like that. So I have to understand what are my propensities, what is my swabhava. And that can be understood not intellectually, but through encounter, like theatrical encounters. Yeah? That is one critical part of the learning process that happens. The second thing that happens is they understand that there are different ways and they start respecting all of this.
Yeah.
See, I was telling you that the Nakula part is not really seen as very good. No, I'm a nice guy. I'm supporting people. I'm not a leader. Because today, when you do a leadership profile, you say assertiveness. Some of the best leaders I've seen are not assertive at all. They're kind, compassionate people. They know how to create a context. They know how to make other people feel safe and valued.
Correct.
That is not Bhima.
Yeah, the true enabling and empowering requires an understanding courage. Yeah.
Exactly. And it requires more courage than a Bhima.
Absolutely.
To trust somebody, to empower them and wait and help them to learn and grow.
Yeah.
So they learn many of these and they start becoming more and more inward learning oriented. The way I was telling you. So we teach them ways of introspection and things like that.
Fantastic.
So you learn how to be introspective. You learn how to go into your interior vanavasa. And some of them actually learn how to go into the Ajnatavasa space.
Wonderful.
And then what you discover about yourself is such deep intuitive capabilities that you develop a whole new respect for yourself, which is very critical you're keeping on comparing me to somebody else, I cannot get this sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
This is extremely critical for leadership. I have to feel secure and strong with myself.
Absolutely.
So there are many things like this, that come
Fantastic.
out of this.
Fantastic.
And also, most important, how to listen to somebody.
Correct.
And to other people.
Yeah.
Most leaders are listening enough to debate or to tell the other person what to do. Experience, when you touch your svabhava, the experience of solidity of being and quietness inside, unless I'm quiet inside, I can't listen.
Correct. True.
It's not a knack. It's a real transformation, because as long as I'm restless, I cannot listen. I'll be only listening to opportunities and threats. That's not listening.
That's analysis.
Analysis, judgment, all kinds of things, which comes from a predetermined idea of how the world should be. Leadership cannot depend on a predetermined idea.
True. Very true. Very true.
Yeah?
Wonderful. Been a pleasure, Raghu. It's so beautiful to look at. I mean, obviously, we can explore so many other aspects or sets of this. Time would never be enough. But thank you for bringing this, the core of why you must look at mythology as a very beautiful, rich way of looking at learning the various dimensions of leadership, and particularly understand the context of leadership. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed your questions. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Raghu. Thank you so much. So nice.